Ibashe Oludumare, Ibashe Owumila, Ibashe Awo Akoda, Ibashe Asheda, Ibashe Ejubona Mefa, Ibashe Agbongbong, Oba Ile Ife, Ibashe Adabalotu Ife, Ibashe Olokun, Ibashe Olasa, Ibashe Aje Ogun Uloso Olamba Aye, Ibashe Ita Merindinogun, Ibashe Orunoko, Ibashe Okunoko, Ibashe Okiti Awooko, Ibashe Oguni Male Deju, Ibashe Babas, Ibashe Yeyes, Ibashe Ori, Ibashe Tototo, Oludumare Emojuba. Kiba me eshi orunjuba. Ashe, 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 Ashe.
But the true essence of magical or occult phenomenon is the creation of an ego, the creation of an identity, but an identity that will hold and maintain through lifetimes. The all in all is a spiritual and unseen subcontext that lies beneath all of reality. That is the all. And that within itself is mental. The greatest thing you can do in this moment is to be aware that these events are happening and to start digging into your creative mind as to where you can begin to assist. So these are not theories and thoughts and ideas that have been developed within me overnight, nor are they theories, thoughts, and ideas that have been developed inside of a vacuum, but they've been tried and proven. The real currently is the desert of the mind, because your mind can only perceive what is real, but you have yet to actually fully. So if the universe is mental, then can the universe learn something? Certainly. Greetings and welcome to another Foundational Friday. I am your conductor, Yuya Asan Anu, Chief Conductor of the Enlightenment and Transformation Channel, Chief Jugna of the Anu Spiritual Order, and Head Instructor of the Sadula House Spiritual Center. All planes, all avenues, and all expressions leading to a focal point of singularity where we can be free and our own self-actualized selves. With that speaks to what we will be covering in today's segment as we are speaking about sex magic. And the thought of sex magic, of course, for many people, can be a very tantalizing idea in order to really bring something of great power or bring something of wondrous manifestation. In order to do that, for some people, there has to be great emotion associated with it, great fun or great excitement. And that often can be found in the world of sex. However you perceive it, sex is a very individualistic thing, as is your consciousness, as is your magic. As I've defined before, magic is how you get things done. That's all. It's just how you do things. So just like there are many ways to get things done, there are many expressions of our consciousness, and there are many expressions of our sexuality. It is a collective thing, and it is an individualistic thing. The expression is individualistic. The activity is a collective one. No different than your magic. When you are performing any spiritual or magical rite, you are using the creativity as offered to you through your individual channels, often guarded, governed, and housed by the spiritual entities that work with you. But ultimately, in order to make something happen, it's never going to be an execution of anything by yourself. You're always going to work with some things or someone else in your magic, no matter what. Even if that other thing is your higher self. Okay? The combination and the mixing of your inner community with your external community, each of which you only really perceive in part. The mixing and blending of those two personalities within itself is an act of submission. Submitting to yourself. Without submission, there can be no sex. You cannot have sex without submission. And in the same instance, you cannot have any magical experience without there being submission. And the first thing one needs to submit to is themselves. You need to submit to the authenticity of the self. How real, how true is the self, and which self is there that we're speaking of? Which self are we tapping into? Without a clear, focused, and authentic submission to that force, the initiate or the spiritual practitioner will not be able to have a positive or regenerative sexual experience, but in fact will have one that is diseased. So we're going to speak about this in this segment, this whole idea of sex magic. And before we do that, we're going to take a quick break. I'll be right back.
And pull your window curtain. Oh, let your moon come shining into our life again. Saying, ooh, it's been a long, long time. I get this message for you, girl. But it seemed I was never on time. Still I wanna get through to you, girl. On time, on time. I want to give you some love. Good, good loving. I want to give you some good, good loving. Oh, say I want to give you some good, good loving. Good, good loving. Turn your lights down low. Never try to resist, oh no. Oh, let my love come tumbling into our life again. Saying, ooh, I love you. And I want you to know right now. Ooh, I love you. And I want you to know right now. 'Cause I want to give you some love. Oh, I want to give you some good, good loving.
All right. So we are on the return for my first break. And of course, you're listening to Foundational Friday. And I am your broadcaster on this evening, Yuya Asan Anu, otherwise known as Chief Yuya. And of course, the subject and what we're discussing on this evening is the idea of sex magic, which is a form of course, sexual alchemy. As we said before, magic is what we do and what we use to move beyond our conventional trappings as well as our conventional framework. Magic is what we utilize to really express our consciousness. Magic is a product of your streams of consciousness. That's where your magic comes from. Okay? So just like many things in the world, when they start to experience a form of alchemy and change and movement, there has to be a release of some sort. The magic is the orgasm of your consciousness. And when your consciousness orgasms, when it comes to its place where it has to release small pockets of energy, it creates what we call spiritual or magical phenomenon. Okay. Well, this happens, of course, in many different ways and many different forms. And, this show was fueled by the idea of the show, because I don't really speak directly to certain things too much, like sex magic and things like that. But there was something that someone had asked me recently. There was an individual who was trying to figure out why they were having trouble dealing. Well, it was two individuals, a couple, why they were having trouble dealing with each other in a harmonious way. And they had come to me for counseling, and I was working with them on that. And they ventured to ask a personal question about how it is that I interact with my mates. And one of the things that I shared was the things that you are having trouble with one another is very difficult for me to conceptualize. For me personally, I can work with you in that sense, but I really don't have integrative experiences with some of the level of jealousy and ownership that they were dealing with, because I just don't function from that place. And as I explained to them, I really only deal with whores. So if a woman's not a whore, I'm really not interested in her. And I will explain what that means. And really, it's not a word that you should be taken back by at all. The whore is the priestess of Heru, the priestess of Horus. And more importantly, what the whore represents, where we also get the term harlot. The harlot or the whore is someone who's come to a place of ownership with their sexuality and understands the divine connection between their sex and their spirituality. So they govern themselves in a certain way based on that. Okay, so someone who is still trying to use their sexual attraction or their ability to attract people through sex for base means, I really can't relate with them. I don't want them for anything base. And I don't want to see them do anything base. That's really a squares mentality for me. And there's nothing square about the Anu family at all. Either you coming with a certain vibration and you understand the sacred responsibility of the whore, or you're thinking inside of a square box. And I can't really work with that. It doesn't work. It doesn't work for anyone, in fact. But not everyone is ready for the responsibility of exchanging and interacting with a whore. Not everyone's ready for that responsibility. Some people, unfortunately, cannot see their mates beyond their genitalia. So when they think of a woman her greatest value is her vagina. In fact, if you take the word whore in Hebrew, the word whore in Hebrew means black hole. You see, even the word punta, as we say in Spanish, it means black hole, or a hole that has been dug in the ground, a hole like a hole inside of the earth, earthen hole. Now, obviously, there's an immediate reference to the biology of a woman in these phrases, but at the same time, there is a deeper understanding that one has to tap into. When you look at the word cunt, for instance, which comes from Kundalini, oftentimes when you say cunt, you're only thinking of the vagina and not really that serpent that is launched out from the passion that is held from the vagina. See, that's why a lot of times individuals have so much trouble with their spiritual work. They lack passion. And I spoke about this in recent shows, how it is the feeling and the emotion when we were dealing with affirmations. The feeling is important, tapping into that sacral chakra. And some people don't know how to do that. So one easy way to tap into the sacral chakra is through the use of sex, right? And this idea of using sex as a magical tool is excellent. There's nothing wrong with it. But certainly we need to learn how to invoke our passion and our compassion for individuals and for the spirits that are trying to communicate with us. A lot of times when you can't, or you feel like you're not connecting to a spirit, you don't feel it. Like people will say, oh, I did this and I did that, but I didn't hear anything. Well, you're never going to hear anything because spirits don't speak. You're going to get electrical impulses, you're going to get feelings, and you're going to get images. That's how the language will be shared with you from that spiritual entity. And a lot of times when people are going through all the motions, but they're finding that they're still not feeling anything, it's because they're having issues in the sacral chakra. Okay. So utilizing sexuality in order to really invoke that passion that's needed to motivate a spiritual entity. Remember, like I said in Grasping the Root of Divine Power, it is emotions that motivate spirits to movement. So by using that, then you are able to, that emotion that you can get, you can able to make some things happen. Of course, when we speak about the energies of Shiva and Shakti, we think about the Kundalini energy, of course, right? And we know that it is a fire. It is an intense fire that rises up through the spine. But within the spine, you also have spinal fluid. One of the important things that you have to understand with your sex magic is that it won't work without a masculine and feminine principle. It's impossible. You can enjoy being the divine feminine or the divine whore or the sacred whore all you want. You can enjoy being the divine pimp or the sacred pimp, whatever it is that you call yourself. I don't know. You can do that all you want, but without the embracing of both principles, you don't get anywhere. That is really the purpose for sex to begin with. And it doesn't necessarily mean that each individual, that the woman has to take the feminine role in the act and the man has to take the masculine role. You see, it doesn't necessarily mean that. So, when you're again dealing with Shiva and Shakti, it doesn't actually automatically have to be assigned to man and woman respectively because you're dealing with a masculine and feminine entity. Okay, your Shakti could be, the male could function as a Shakti and the female could function as a Shiva, depending on what it is that you're trying to accomplish and what works best for you. See, the thing is, when it comes to sexual magic and sexual alchemy, the first thing you have to understand, which is the most important thing, is that there are no rules. Of course, individuals will tell you that there are certain things you have to do and this and that, but it's actually not true. If there are rules to your sexual magic, then there must be rules to how your consciousness flows. Because remember, again, your magic is a byproduct of your consciousness. So by limiting your sexual visualizations by what you consider to be rules, then you will limit the flow of your consciousness. Now, certainly, that really applies to just about anything that we're working with spiritually and otherwise. But there's an aspect to that. There are no rules, but there are consequences. So doing things that are against the natural order will produce an unnatural product. And for instance, it's unnatural for people to have diseases. The natural state, the normal state of your body is to be at ease. And when you are sick, you are diseased. So your diseases often come from wicked sexual acts. Bestiality is responsible for many different diseases that we now deal with in our world, like herpes. It was said that it came first from people having sex with sheeps, which is unnatural to rape a sheep because it's rape. So just in certain activities and certain executions, you can create sickness within yourself. So I want you to think about that when I say that, of course, there are no rules. I want you to remember that there are no rules, but there are certainly consequences. Okay? Now, two energies that must be present when we're working, like I said, there must be a masculine principle, there must be a feminine principle. In fact, when you look through so many different traditions, Mayan traditions, the Hindi traditions, the Gnostic traditions, of course the Kemetic traditions, the Yoruba traditions, the Igbo traditions, you will find that there is always a masculine creative principle and a feminine creative principle. Always, even in the Hebraic, you will have the Elohim, meaning the gods and goddesses. So there is always this masculine and feminine aspect, even if times when that masculine principle may have a bestial aspect and the feminine principle will have a bestial aspect. You know, it may be like two snakes, a masculine and feminine snake, but it's still a masculine and feminine energy. And when you create a pseudo-sexual vibration, that is against your nature and against that divine nature, then what in fact happens is you create a snake now, because we're dealing with the Kundalini, we're dealing with Shiva and Shakti, we're dealing with Osumare, we're dealing with the snake that you see all throughout the world in Buddhism, Hinduism, the Persian myths. Of course, the Kemetic myth, you always see the caduceus snake, as usually that staff carried by Hermes. And that snake can go either way. The heads can go to the top of the staff and face one another, or they can go to the bottom of the staff. So if your sexuality or if your sexual acts are a product of your thinking, then you will create wicked snakes. That is the side of the polarity that you will be dealing with. If your sexual acts are a product of your consciousness, then you will create natural snakes. And what will then happen is that you will cultivate and enhance that Kundalini or that divine energy in yourself as well as your partner. And the very interesting thing about sexual magic is that you don't actually have to have vaginal to phallus intercourse for this to occur. So we're going to take another quick break, and then when we return, I'm I'm going to explain more about the essence of sexual magic.
I'd rather be with you until that day will fly away. I just love that smiling face in the early sun. If I can't have you to myself, then life's no fun.
I'd rather be with you, yeah. Yeah, I'd rather be with you. I'd rather be with you, yeah. Yeah, I'd rather be with you.
I want to hold your hand, oh, if I can just be a man. I wanna be your friend, not now and then, but until the end. I just love the way you act, and that's a fact. I wanna be your number one, so get to that.
Yeah, so I'm back again. Again, you have been listening to Foundational Friday on the Enlightenment and Transformation Network. And of course, now speaking is H. Yuya Asan Anu, affectionately known as Chief Yuya. And before we took our last break, we were speaking about a couple of key points in sexual alchemy, one of which being the necessity of submission when sexual alchemy comes into place. We were speaking about the place of the divine whore or the sacred whore in all of this work, and understanding that a whore in its truest and original sense was someone who was able to understand their sensuality and their sexuality and where the lines crossed and where they did not need to cross. There was nothing vulgar about it, but in fact it was an ownership of that dark hole or that watery dark aspect of the female that is so necessary for her to have in order to bring forth the next stage in her man's evolution. This is depicted by our dear Osset, also known as Isis, when she resurrected and reassembled her man, Osir, also known as Osiris, and gave birth to Heru, or as many call Horus. In that, she was bringing forth the highest manifestation and realization of Osir, or Osiris, in the form of Heru. She only would have been able to do this after learning the sexual mysteries of the light. Heru is a name that not only means heaven, but it also means light. Light is a key piece when we're speaking about the sexual mysteries or the sexual secrets and the wisdom of sex. Sex is indeed a product, or not so much a product, but it exists within the realm of wisdom. Not so much mystery. Wisdom is something that does not naturally occur. Wisdom is not a natural phenomenon. It does not naturally unfurl itself to a population. But in fact, wisdom makes itself available when it's able to be properly clasped. Then wisdom will appear. Okay. So we have this idea of the whore, the sacred whore, who brings forth the highest energy in her man in the form of their children. And their children not only need to be physical, but also can be the next step in their consciousness. As we know, Osir or Osiris suffered from a fragmented consciousness, and it was Osir who came, or Set who came and reassembled said consciousness, but also created the next step. So this is just one of the many reasons why I only deal with whores. I only deal with harlots. That's all I'm interested in. So a square conversation about texts, messages from high school friends or old boyfriends from college, I can't really relate to that. That doesn't, I can speak to it. I can speak about the issue with it. I can speak about the problem. I can fix it. I've never had anyone step away from my counseling saying that things you gave us that didn't work. I have a pretty good track record when it comes to counseling, but one of the reasons is because I'm outside of it. I don't get emotionally involved in what's being spoken about because I'm not there. My mind is not, I'm just not wired that way to see a woman as a walking vagina and bouncing breasts and nothing else. As I said before the break, before we even engage in the physical, sexual, intimate act, there is sex that already occurs. If you ever have an opportunity to use a mortar and pestle and pound herbs with your mate, then in fact, you are participating in a wonderful, regenerative, and ashe building sexual activity. It is the mortar and pestle, which is an ancient symbol we find all the way back in Babylonian times. We find all the way back in Kemetic sculptures, as well as sculptures coming out of the Uganda region. The mortar and pestle within itself represents the interaction of the lingam and the yoni. The lingam and the yoni. And for those of you who are not as tight on the terminology, the lingam is the male phallus, and the yoni is the female vagina, if you want to look at it in that way. I guess female vagina is kind of a redundant statement, I would hope. But then again, we're in a time of so many different advances in medicine and technology, you know. In Sanskrit, which lingam is the lingam, the word, it actually means a sign. Okay, so the lingam itself, or the male phallus itself, is the sign and mark in the source of creation. Okay, and this is represented or really connected with the energy of Shiva, the lingam. Okay, remember Shiva again being the male principle and Shakti being the female principle. And there's many different symbols that we use as it comes to our spirituality and our sexuality. Of course, like I did a breakdown on the lotus some time ago, and we saw that the lotus also represented the vagina, right? Even the trunk of Ganapati. You remember who Ganapati is? Gana, just like the place, also known as Ganesh. His trunk actually represents also the male penis. And you'll find that usually it's either curved or it's twisted in his depictions, which represents a male penis as it is flaccid, which has one meaning, and one that is erect, as in our images of Osir have another meaning to them. Okay, so we have our lingam, we have our yoni, and these things are depicted in so many different not only artistic executions from different artists around the world, but also just in some of the very actions and things that we do together. And there are things that you can do with your mate that begin to generate the sexual energy. And you'll find that when you actually do engage in the act, if you still do, or if you still can, that your magic in the spiritual aspect of it is just that much more powerful, because you've submitted to one another in an act. In fact, it is the act of cooperation that brings the greatest explosion of sexual magic and alchemy. It is the cooperation aspect. And in the cooperative aspect, one has to cooperate with the natural order of things. There will always be a dominant energy, and there will always be a submissive energy. And the dominant will still be submissive. So in fact, they're both submissive, but one takes the lead and one takes the receptive. Okay. And of course, no matter how we really look at this, in any sense, the woman is always going to take the receptive. No matter what position the man is able to twist and mangle himself into, he will still, at least if we're speaking about the act of insertion, he will insert and she will receive. But prior to that act, there are so many different ways for the man to experience the energy of receptivity without sacrificing or compromising his manhood. Again, something as simple as taking some seeds and putting them into a mortar and pestle and working them together allows both male and female to cross the line a bit and experience that energy together. And what happens is, like I said, you begin to generate the energy. And you may find that in even doing that work together, that there'll be a certain arousal that will come. You'll have a certain arousal. But let's get back to this idea of Haru, right? And Osir and Oset bringing forth Haru, the light, also meaning heaven, because we're speaking about really recreating and bringing our snakes to a higher place, not directionally, not geographically. I don't want you to look at that physically. I want you to look at having sex as a beast or having sex as an expression of consciousness. Certainly you can do either one. Okay, you can do either one. There is a commingling of cosmic juices and cosmic fluids whether you're coming with higher thought or whether you're coming with lower thought, you're still going to make something. But if we look at the idea of Haru for a moment, let's look at another idea that is associated with sex that often we shame away and we chase away because of our thoughts about really just there needing to be a certain purity in the sexual act, which there does need to be. In fact, your idea of fornication as given to you by the Bible, fornication does not mean to have sex with someone you're not married to. In fact, fornication means to have sex through unnatural means. That is what fornication is. It's when you're having sex, but you're doing it from low vibration and in an unnatural way. So a woman may be a woman who's considered to be chaste, but it doesn't mean that she's necessarily a virgin. And to be a virgin doesn't necessarily mean that you haven't had sex. Like when we speak about the Virgin Mary, right? Doesn't mean that she didn't have sex. It just meant that she was young and she was chaste. So there's another idea associated with sex that we try to run away from. One, because of our religious understandings, and also because sometimes we can't control the energy. We feel it needs to be controlled. And that's the idea of lust. You know, at one point, lust was actually a word that was used in the temples. It was a word that was synonymous with holy. When you look at the word holy, coming from the Greek helios, meaning sun. Sun, we know, also was symbolized by the idea of Ra, right? And we know, of course, the Christ was called the Son of Man. Well, when we look at that for a moment, we will also find that the word lust, which is also created to the word, connected to the word luster, lust also means light. So lust, holiness, and light, or holy, are actually the same word. They all mean light, and as does Haru. So let's look at it again. Haru, light, heaven, lust, holy. Same word, same meaning, same concept. So the idea of being lustful or to be lusted after represented, I'm shining, I have that much light, I'm radiating, I'm glowing. And now because of that, I am being lusted after. It is the light that they want. And as I've said many times before, there is no light without fire. So you will find that in this work, the elements of fire and the elements of water are critical. Nothing really moves without the elements of light and the elements of water. In fact, in our Hebraic tongue, we have a word by the name of Shen, S-H-E-N. It's a symbol. And Shen itself means fire. Okay. Now, let's look at that word for a minute and connect it with what we're speaking about. Typically, when we're speaking about fire in the Hebraic sense, it's actually usually written with two letters, and it will be pronounced Esh. Okay, so by itself, it is Shin. And when used in conjunction in a sentence, rather, you'll see Esh. And Esh is very interesting because it's two letters, one of which depicting fire, the other one depicting or meaning man, M-A-N. So you'll see within this idea of fire, even within the language, there is the placement of the masculine principle, right? So you have Esh and Shin. Shin takes us again to our Yoruba, where we have Shin, Shan, or Shan, Shango. Okay, taking us again even to the Sangomic tradition, and even taking us to all the way over to China, where we have the Xin dynasty, spelled Xian, Xi apostrophe A-N, but it's actually pronounced Xin, okay, as symbolized by the fire of the dragon. So you see that this principle of fire is very critical when it comes to creation, because that word for fire was what was utilized when we read Genesis and read about how from the dust of the ground man was created, and the breath from God's nostrils was breathed into his nostrils, the breath of God, and he became a living soul. Okay, that breath is depicted as fire was breathed into his nostrils, and he became a living soul. And then for the feminine principle, we have the ideal of Mim. And Mim is a very interesting word. It not only means water, but it represents the feminine flow, the flow of the feminine principle in our Hebraic tongue. And it is said that this, in the Zohar form, that this spring of flow, or this spring of water, flows from Kether to Chokmah. Now, of course, we're going into our Kabbalistic studies on this one. But Kether is the crown. And as I explained in Altar and Shrine, I broke down Kether and its relationship to ether. And when we go from the crown to Chokmah, Kether means crown, and Chokmah means wisdom. So you see with the feminine principle, there's a flow from the source, always. Kether being that originating source, and it being animated by the fire of Shin, of Shango. Shango is the movement of the source. It is that fire. And in fact, it is the flow and the re-illumination, the purifying waters of Oya, or who you may call in your Hindu system, Kali. It is that purification of her water that regenerates the individual. So it is the fire in the water that becomes critical. You'll even see images of Kali standing over her lover, Shiva, in certain depictions. And he is slain, and she is squatting, in fact, over his dead body. Okay, and what this represents is the crone aspect. Okay, and the crone aspect, one of the reasons why the crone, or the old witch, we could say, has always been so scary to people, because the crone, as I explained in the show that we did on Oba, when we talked about how the crone and even Oba would carry the Siths, and the Sith connects us to the Grim Reaper, which is the Reaper of souls. This takes us to the idea that love is, or not love, more so sex, and the orgasm is considered the little death. This was the death that Shaitan had warned, the serpent, I should say, had warned Adam and Eve about, that he said, you won't die, but you'll know right from wrong if you eat this fruit. Well, in that Hebraic form, that term fruit was da'at, D-A-A-T, and da'at means knowledge, just like gnosis or Gnostic means knowledge. Okay, so it was going into that place of knowledge, right, which can create that little death. You see, everybody wants to change, but nobody wants, or really the opposite. Everybody wants to transform, but nobody wants to change. So the crone represents that change of life that nobody wants to go through, but they want the transformation that comes with it. And you can't have one without the other. If you really want to understand this idea more, if you need something that's maybe more accessible to you, I would invite you to study the energy of the Scorpio. Study the energy of the Scorpio, and you will learn a lot about sex and transformation. So you will find with this energy of Kali, and that Kali, she's considered the destroyer. Okay, and she gives birth while squatting over Shiva. Now, of course, this is also a sign of Osir and Oset, because it is said that when they generated Heru, they were in what we call the Isis position, or where she was on top of him, riding him, while he was laying flat down, which again, I've spoken on this before. This is a position that's very good for a man's heart. If you're having any heart issues, it's even heartache, this is a very good position for you to do. You'll feel the difference immediately. If you are having trouble with seeing one another beyond your genitalia, and you need to see each other as equals, then the best way for you to have sexual intercourse is horizontal, both of you together laying side on your side. You can either face one another, or you can do it where you're facing the same direction, but you want to both be on your sides. So when we go back to this idea of Heru, we see that in order for the light to come forth from our sexual alchemy, that we must be willing to face the crone. We have to look into the face of Kali. We have to look into the face of Oya. We even have to look into the face of Mut in order to bring forth Heru. See, that is having sex from the consciousness and not having sex from the mind. If you have sex with your brain, with your human mind, you will create a beast. You would create a beast. Okay? This whole idea of knowing is so critical, and being awakened. The knowing, if you look at even Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs, right? How does she go to sleep? It was by the poisoned apple. Or what did the apple represent? The At. Again. And what it represented was her going into that dark world and into that sleep world, and needing the sexual alchemy of the lingam of her quote unquote Prince Charming to wake her up again. So there are different forms. Just because we go into the knowing of sexuality, if we go into it unaccompanied with our mates, it will put us to sleep. It will turn men into beasts. And it will send women spiraling into a state of deep unconsciousness, a comatose state. This is the science of Beauty and the Beast. Beauty and the Beast is actually a story of sexuality. It's a very old story. It's not something that just Disney made up. It's a very old story about sexuality. You'll find that most of these childhood fairy tales are about sex. Little Red Riding Hood, it's about her staying on the path of purity and chastity, and she got off the path, which she was warned about. And the red hood represented the red hood. It was the blood. It was the menstrual flow. She became a woman, and the wolf represented sexuality. And when she got entangled with the wolf, she caused all of these different issues. So it was a story about chastity. Chastity and purity are necessary in order for you to give birth to higher consciousness through your sexual alchemy. I have not given you any techniques per se, because there are no rules. What I'm doing is I'm starting you off with the mindset that you must have before you go into the worship of sexuality. You have to come in with a certain mindset, or your alchemy won't really work right. And the mindset you have to have is you have to get the mind out of the way. You'll find that once you remove the mind out of the way, you will have no sense of attachment towards your mate. When there is no sense of attachment, there's no jealousy. So your lust becomes pure, because your light becomes pure. And once the lust that you have for one another, or the light that you have for one another, once that becomes a pure thing, then she will see you as the redeeming and regenerative Osir, who is emitting green light, which is the pure light. That's the good stuff. Emitting the pure green light. And you will see her as reflecting the light of Heru and the potential of Heru. You will see her as being the potential of bringing forth the next Heru, the higher step in consciousness. And again, this can just happen when you're mashing some herbs together. Before you even lay down into the bed, it can happen then. It is the push and pull, the flow, that you want to get into before you get into anything else. You have to be able to see each other beyond your genitalia. And even if there's no one present, if you're by yourself, you can still perform sexual alchemy. Women, do not be afraid to put a phallus on your shrine, and men, do not be afraid to have an image of the yoni on your shrines. If you have no one currently present who you can lust for, and they can lust for you, pay attention to the fact that I've not used really love in this whole scenario. And speaking of sexual alchemy, I've spoken about whores, pimps, and lust. Because in fact, it is the higher consciousness, the ability and the encouragement that you have to face the crone destroyer, and the women, it is your ability to reflect the consciousness into a higher light that creates real sex. And that now makes those two serpents that are going up the spine of you two, that erect spine, or Mushe's staff. Mushe you would know as Moses, whose name is comprised of fire and water. So we get the name, that the principal pieces in his name are fire and water and God. Okay, this is Mushe, or Moses, or Musa, as many people say. So you have to have the water, you have to have the fire. It won't work without it. In your own mouth, your tongue is your fire, and your saliva is your water, which will bring forth higher consciousness. So you'll see with sexual alchemy and sexual magic, there are so many different forms to use it and to express it that have nothing to do with laying down on a bed with one another. Of course, we would do a part 2, like I did a part 2 yesterday of how to write a book. But I just wanted to get your conscious in the right place before we even started talking about positions and things like that, and chants and breathing and all those different things that are important to this. So I know the Black Friday deal will be ending today or tomorrow for those 50% off readings that Sister Felicia is doing. And of course, I will be overseeing as well as including a portion of my own into the Life Path readings. So I urge you all to get them, because the end of the year is coming, and it's a new financial year coming forth, right? So we want to do things differently. If we want different, we have to do different. So I urge you to sign up now. I know it's for a limited time. I think they end today or tonight. So you want to get in now. I know a bunch of people have already signed up for them. So the roster spots are filling up. So you want to come in and get yours now before the spots fill up. And plus, I like doing and seeing Life Path readings, so I'll be overseeing them and making sure that my piece is in there, in the Odu and the Orisha aspect is there as well. So it's always good when I know that people have the direction that they need. Remember, you need to RSVP now. Philadelphia, Black and Nobel, December 27th. I will be speaking on the 14 African Principles. It will be an excellent lecture. All right. And until then, tune in this Sunday, 11 a.m. Eastern, 8 a.m. Pacific, to Chief Speaks. Make sure if you have questions, you call in bright and early. Get to me early, so we can have you in the queue. Every week, we seem to have people who don't get their questions answered. So just make sure you call in as early as you can. And I look forward to speaking to you then. Until then, I am Chief Yuya, signing off. One aim.